Let's start with specialized tax incentives. In particular, we're going to discuss the benefits of 4 specific tax incentives that may be available for your company. They all create additional cash flow opportunities and should be thoroughly explored. We will be discussing hiring incentives, including the Worker Opportunity Tax Credit, also known as WOTC, and COVID Disaster Relief Employee Retention Credit, also known as ERC. To round out our discussion, we're also going to take a look at an engineer-based cost seg study, property tax mitigation, and the R&D tax credit. Let's kick this off with the hiring incentives. The Worker Opportunity Tax Credit is not one, but several tax credits given to employees at a federal level for hiring qualified employees or American job seekers who have consistently faced barriers to employment. Employers claim over $1 billion annually under this program, and there is no minimum number of hired employees required for an employee or a company to qualify for this tax credit. The average WOTC benefit per qualified employee is $2,400 and could be as high as $9,600. Also, just keep in mind that WOTC credits may be carried back 1 year and carried forward 20 years. After the required certification is secured, taxable employers claim WOTC is a general business credit against their income taxes, and tax-exempt employers claim the WOTC against their payroll taxes. It's imperative, though, and this is really, really important. It's imperative that an employer apply for it and receive certification verifying that your new hire is a member of the targeted group before you can claim the tax credit. One of the big questions we always hear is, well, who qualifies? There's a couple different qualifications for these recipients, and one is it's called a qualified 4A recipient. Now, that's an individual who's a member of a family receiving assistance under a state plan approved under Part A of the Title IV of the Social Security Act relating to temporary assistance for needy families. The assistance must be received for any 9-month period during the 18-month period ending on the hiring date. Qualified veterans. They define a qualified veteran as a veteran who is any of the following: a member of a family receiving assistance under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, for at least 3 months during the first 15 months of employment. Unemployed for a period totaling of at least 4 weeks, whether or not consecutive, but less than 6 months in a 1-year period ending on the hiring date. Unemployment for a period totaling at least 6 months, whether or not consecutive, in the 1-year period ending on the hiring date. Disabled veteran entitled to compensation for a service-connected disability hired not more than 1 year after being discharged or released from active duty in the armed services. A disabled veteran entitled to compensation for a service-connected disability who is unemployed for a period totaling at least 6 months, whether or not consecutive, in the 1-year period ending on the hiring date. Ex-felons also qualify. And what's the definition of an ex-felon? Well, the definition of an ex-felon is a qualified ex-felon is a person hired within a year of being convicted of a felony or being released from prison from a felony. Designated community resident is an individual who, at the date of hiring, is at least 18 years of age and under 40, resides within the empowerment zone, an enterprise community or renewal community, and continues to reside at the locations after they are employed. Additional qualifying factors include summer youth employees, SNAP recipients, supplemental Social Security income recipients, long-term family assistance recipients, and qualified long-term unemployment recipients, which includes a person who has been unemployed for not less than 27 consecutive weeks at the time of hiring and received unemployment compensation during some or all of the unemployment period. As mentioned, though, an employer must obtain certification that an individual is a member of the targeted group before the employer may claim the credit. An eligible employer must file Form 8850, pre-screening notice and certification request for their Worker Opportunity Tax Credit, with the respective state workforce agency within 28 days after the eligible worker begins. They're very strict with this code, okay? So we need to make sure that as you're bringing on these employees and they are qualified, we're following within those guidelines, because if we don't, it's exempt. You guys are going to lose out on the credit. My suggestion is that you should contact your state workforce agency with any specific processing questions regarding Form 8850. Taxable employers, once the certification is received, they claim the tax credit as a general business credit on tax form 3800 against their income tax filing income tax by filing Form 5884, Form 3800, and your business-related income tax returns. And tax-exempt employers, for your nonprofits and things like that, they're going to claim their credit against the employer's Social Security tax by separately filing Form 5884-C, Work Opportunity Tax Credit for qualified tax-exempt organizations hiring qualified veterans.
Now, the next hiring incentive that we're going to look at is the Employee Retention Credit, or the ERC, which has gotten a lot of press recently with the pandemic. As part of the federal pandemic relief package, Congress updated the ERC to encourage employers to keep employees on the payroll. Now, with continued expansions to ERC, nearly every employer at this point qualifies for this tax credit. Employers are encouraged to take advantage of this expansion, as a qualified employee can bring up to $33,000 to the employer. Now, one of the questions is who's eligible. We'll take a look at who's eligible. Private employers and nonprofits that have had operations fully or partially suspended as a result of COVID-19, or have experienced a significant decline in gross receipts directly as a result of coronavirus. Startups, they can qualify, and employers now who took the Paycheck Protection Program loan, they're also eligible to take the retention credit. Now, how much can a tax credit be? For 2020, it's 50% of the first $10,000 in compensation, or $5,000 per employee. And in 2021, it's 70% of the first $10,000 per quarter, or $28,000 per employee. Now, how's the credit paid, or how do you benefit? The credit's going to reduce your employer's Social Security tax liability. If your credit's larger than your Social Security tax liability, then you can get a direct refund from the IRS for the difference. The credit's normally claimed on your federal employment tax returns using Form 941 for your employer's quarterly federal tax return. If you've already filed, an amendment can be made to Form 941 if you determine after you file that you actually are eligible. Eligible employers can file for an advance on the ERC as well. And one of the benefits is you can claim the credit immediately by reducing payroll taxes. Now, if you do your research, there are firms that provide ERC calculations for you and can help really maximize your overall benefit. However, if you do engage this type of a firm, it's really important that you involve your CPA, because your CPA is going to provide advice and consultation on how best to utilize any of the tax credits that you receive.
You know, hiring incentives can be complicated, so it's important to engage an expert that has a proven track record in procuring the maximum credit. You know, really the same could be said if you own commercial property and you want to explore lowering your annual property taxes.
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at property taxes, they're a significant source of local and state revenue. Property taxes make up approximately 39% of annual and local state business taxes paid, equaling approximately $617 billion. Anyone that owns commercial property understands when they write that check just how substantial the taxes can be. However, there are ways to reduce these taxes, just aside from a simple appeal. Property tax mitigation. It's a simple way to ensure that you're not overpaying for your commercial property taxes. To be ensured that you're not overpaying, an industry specialist with extensive market value experience in valuation, tax, and law is going to want to be retained. The service is very, very thorough, and what they do is they work to identify any potential opportunity for refunds and/or reductions in your current property taxes. Whomever represents you typically performs all the work until savings are captured, and that includes partaking in hearings and filing necessary paperwork. Once this is done, the immediate benefit of engaging a professional in a property tax mitigation project is a reduction in taxes owed and a potential refund on prior taxes paid. Now, if you look at the future benefits similarly, it's going to be reduced tax burdens going forward, producing an increased cash flow for your organization. So that's going to segue and lead us into another tax incentive. And this tax incentive allows you to kind of go back into the future and travel to the past to capture cash flow benefits during your journey and bring them up to the present. That's an engineer-based cost segregation study. So a way to accelerate your depreciation schedule and capture a large cash flow benefit is through a cost seg study. A cost segregation study, it can be completed by a CPA firm. However, according to the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, Cost segregation studies should be performed by qualified individuals or firms, such as those employing personnel competent in design, construction, auditing, estimating procedures relating to building construction. And as such, you may want to consider engaging a firm that utilizes a team and has highly qualified IP attorneys with engineer backgrounds, CPAs, and construction engineers. And you're going to want to adhere to the IRS recognized detailed engineering approach to perform all cost segregation studies. What is the cost segregation study? An engineering-based cost segregation study, it permits commercial real estate owners to reclassify real property to accelerate your depreciation schedule. This reclassification is going to result in significant cash flow benefits in both present and future years through considerably shorter depreciable tax life and accelerated depreciation methods. So in short, a cost segregation study identifies and reclassifies property assets to shorten the depreciation time for taxation purposes, which reduces current income tax obligations. Personal property assets, they're going to include a building's non-structural elements, exterior land improvements, and indirect construction costs. So the primary goal of a cost segregation study is to identify all construction-related costs that could be depreciated over a shorter tax life, typically 5, 7, and 15 years, versus the building with 39 years for non-residential real property. So personal property assets found in a cost segregation study generally include items that are affixed to the building, but do not relate to the overall operation and maintenance of the building. Now, looking at recent tax law changes, specifically under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, we're going to call it the TCJA, it's JA because we love acronyms. It's given a boost to cost seg. Bonus depreciation was increased from 50% to 100% on certain qualifying assets. So real estate investors will receive immediate expensing of certain 5, 7, and 15-year properties. TCJA also allows used property that was acquired after September 27, 2017 to qualify for this special depreciation treatment. So if you're looking for a quality cost segregation study, you're going to want to look for one that will separate any costs that qualify under the new bonus depreciation rules.
Yeah. I mean, the final tax incentive that we're going to discuss today is the R&D tax credit. You know, please excuse the pun on our slide, but the fact is this. This credit has been greatly expanded throughout the years. The R&D tax credit is a federal program listed under Section 41 of the IRC and is designed for taxpayers to design, develop, or improve products, processes, formulas, or even software. The credit is calculated based on increases in research activities and expenditures, and as a result, it's really intended to reward companies that pursue innovation with increasing investment. The R&D tax credit provides an avenue to receive tax money back from prior years while also redoing current taxable income on a dollar-for-dollar basis. This credit provides much needed cash to hire additional employees, increase your research and development, expand your facilities, and a lot more. A lot of the potential benefits of R&D tax credit include the opportunity to receive anywhere between 12 to 16 cents of federal and state R&D tax credits for every qualified dollar spent. With stuff like this, it's going to be able to increase your earnings per share, reduce your effective tax rate, and it's going to improve cash flow and can be carried forward up to 20 years. A lot of people don't realize that. I think one of the things that are available but not often taken advantage of is the ability to perform look-back studies to recognize unclaimed credits for open tax years. Generally, it's about 3 or 4 years. So what qualifies as an R&D qualified activity through the IRC? Well, you can develop, design, or fabricate your own products, develop new or improved processes. You perform prototyping or modeling, develop new software applications. Maybe you test or do some quality assurance or QA. You're automating some of your internal processes. You're performing any engineering functions. And even if you develop or apply for a patent, these all fall under the IRC guidelines. Historically, though, startups were not paying federal income taxes could claim R&D tax credits, but you would need to carry them forward on their corporate returns until they could offset their income tax liabilities. This made it difficult for startups or businesses that weren't profitable to benefit from these credits. Look, we all know these startups, first year or two, it's tough, all right? But in 2015, Congress actually changed this and made the R&D tax credit a permanent part of the Protecting Americans from Tax Hike Act of 2015. they made the key changes so that more businesses could really benefit. And with the changes, startups can apply against the employer portion of Social Security taxes up to $250,000 for each fiscal year. The offset allows qualified small businesses to receive a benefit for their research activities regardless of profitability. So what's a qualified small business or startup? Well, through IRC guidelines, it's a business that has gross receipts of $5 million a year or less for that tax year, has gross receipts for 5 years or less. But keep in mind, businesses must not have gross receipts for any tax year before the 5-year period ending with the tax year they are applying for. And a small business cannot, I can't stress this enough, cannot be a tax exempt organization under Section 501.
Let's hit the pause button for a minute so you can stretch your mind, grab a refreshment. Also, if you have any questions, please use the chat box to message directly to me, and we will do our best to address your question during the breaks. If we can't get to your question, we promise that we will follow up with you or email you the information that you requested. While we wait to see if there's any questions, we would like to thank Michael Weiss for providing us the opportunity to present to the University of Central Florida Business Incubator Program.
I know that a lot of times specialized tax incentives can be a little bit dry, without a doubt, as taxes normally are, but it's truly an incredible opportunity to increase cash flow and really benefit the bottom line and growth model for your company. So if you haven't explored the benefits, we so recommend that you do engage a professional where you can. And I think you may be a little bit surprised at what's available, even for smaller businesses and startups. There's some really amazing things that are available, and there's been a lot of changes. I mean, if you look at the ERC right now, I think it went through 2 variations or 2 changes. Prior to the last change, if you got a PPP loan, you couldn't qualify for ERC. And if you've got even a handful of employees and you qualify for the maximum benefit of $33,000 per employee is quite a bit of money. So they really have provided an opportunity for you to increase cash flow through a variety of different options. But we're going to jump into.
Well, hold on one second, Daniel. We actually have a question.
Okay, by all means.
Karen would like to know how a look-back study looks for R&D and what kind of expenses qualify for the R&D besides salary.
What kind of expenses? Here, read that again. The look back.
The look-back study, how does that work for R&D tax credits?
The look back study, how does it work? Well, first, it's the qualified activities, right? If you match the qualified activities, what's the look back on that, Vinny? It's typically three to 5 years. Yeah. If you qualify, what we recommend you do is take a look at I think it's the payroll taxes we went through. Do you remember the slide, Ben? You were doing that slide.
Yeah, the payroll taxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're answering the question correctly.
Yeah.
So what does the look back look like? Is that?
Yeah. So how far back? You're going 3 to 5 years back, and then you're pulling that into your next current return, or are you amending the return?
You're pulling it into, well, it depends. That's why you want to engage your CPA, because you can go as far out as, I think it's 20 years. So you can pull it into the now, or you can amend. So that's going to be based on a consultation. The R&D itself, if like what we do is we calculate the R&D, but we don't consult. We have CPAs that we partner with, and they're going to give you the best approach to maximizing the benefits. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I was told that could be a trigger for an audit.
Of course.
Everything could be a trigger for an audit.
No, I get it, that everything can, but there are some things that are heightened, are scrutinized more carefully when you do an amended return, as opposed to when you're claiming it in the year of. And
absolutely. But if you can quantify the qualified activities, it triggers an audit. Nobody wants to be audited,
right?
But it's going to be more than just amending based on qualified activities going back 3 years. A good example is like a cost segregation study. you can accelerate your depreciation schedule just with a typical CPA firm, but they're going to use estimates, flooring estimates. They're going to use lumber estimate, right? But when you do an engineer-based study, they're going to give you actuals with a construction engineer. So when the IRS looks at your return, they're going to look and say, all right, well, this is just a regular cost seg study with estimate. That triggers obviously an audit versus an engineer-based. If you go to a firm that specializes in R&D tax credits, and they'll prepare the paperwork for you and provide it to your CPA, I get 99% of the time, you're not going to trigger an audit. It's not going to happen.
So how it's prepared
without a doubt
is the mitigating factor in whether or not you're raising a red flag.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that's assuming that we're completely honest with 100% of everything that's on that paperwork, obviously. And there's no other red flags or anything that would trigger. But yeah, it's the preparation is key. And then the consultation and how you exercise or execute the available tax credits and benefits that comes after. So your accountant's going to be basically the one that flies the plane after the calculations are completed. And that's going to be based on information you provide. So you're not going to get audited if you have a firm that specializes in R&D tax credits, providing an executive summary to your accountant, and he's going to utilize that to effectively offset and you can prove qualified activity. It's not going to happen.
Okay, so then that takes me to the second question, which is, besides salary, what kind of expenses qualify for R&D?
I'll send you I have a complete list I can send to you. I can send it to either Michael. If I send it to Karen, will you forward it? Perfect. I'll have that to you within 20 minutes after the end of the presentation.
Excellent.
All right. The expenses. What other, if there's anything else too, you need list wise or information wise, Karen, just let Jen know. We'll get you whatever you need. We have a plethora of information.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your question. Does anyone else have any other questions before we move along?
Come on, bring it on. This is the fun part. This is where we get to take a break. All right, let's move forward, Jen.
All right, fantastic. All right, next part of our discussion is going to focus on some of the costs associated with the essential services.
All right, when engaging a service provider, right? And these are your essential services. If you're a store, it's your credit cards, it's your phone, it's your internet. You're usually trying to negotiate the lowest rates possible without hopefully sacrificing quality. And as entrepreneurs, we're ultra sensitive to costs and basically anything that's going to influence our net revenue. Most of us engage a service provider, and we really don't think about the costs until our contract terms expired and we're looking for either a new service or to renew that specific service. Then we look at the costs. However, there are strategies that you can employ to reduce the cost of your existing service providers without having to change that provider or without having to change the terms or be penalized under current contract terms. So today we're going to take a look at a couple. We're going to look at, if you take credit cards, your credit card merchant services, we're going to look at waste and recycling, workers' comp, parcel shipping, and corporate wireless plans.
You know, we're gonna kind of start off with merchant services. It's like, you know, how many times has a credit card merchant rep, you know, contacted you and pitched your service in part on just their overall fees? Look, we all know credit cards are going to carry fees. It's going to be harmful to our bottom line sometimes. You know, and how many times have we walked into like a convenience store or a gas station, only to see the difference, you know, you're going to pay cash is cheaper than paying by credit card. You know, the fact is this, look, I mean, we sometimes pay a heavy cost for the privilege of taking credit cards, you know, but there are options. And these options don't include having to constantly change service providers or even call your rep to try to negotiate a lower rate. There's companies that you can engage, or you can try to do it yourself with like a little research. You know, the first thing you're going to do is correct the processing plan to reflect the most competitive plan type and rate. Companies performing this service for you tend to use formulated specific asks of the existing provider. These asks can be found by a simple research, just basically using Google. You know, believe it or not, some of the supposed non-negotiable fees can be reduced through processing optimization, where you help, you know, qualify payment transactions at lower interchange rates by passing through additional processing data. You're going to typically see the highest success rates for companies that process like their credit card payments, where the card is physically not present. In addition, companies processing card payments between $1 million and $2 million annually typically have the largest potential savings opportunities. But keep in mind, for card present locations where the card is actually physically, given to the cashier and used at a terminal device, there may still be significant savings. Because of how much time it really takes to run our business, we generally don't take the time to really look at service agreements or like current service levels, once we procure that service. And this truly is really the fact with, when you're dealing with waste and recycling. Overall, 80% of businesses that utilize waste and recycling services can benefit from a closer look at their costs. There's a lot of billing errors and overcharges can be found by just looking at your invoice. Service agreements, equipment, and current service levels on a quarterly basis. The needs of our business change rapidly. We don't really associate these changes with triggering the need to really review our existing services. We found that businesses with a minimum monthly waste and recycling cost of about $500 typically benefit from hitting the pause button and really taking a much closer look at your monthly invoice and service and some of your service level agreements. These quarterly reviews can be outsourced to firms that specialize in this type of service, or can be really completed by yourself. Again, just look it up on Google. Customize your programs, like increased recycling pickups, tailored pickup schedules, and correct size equipment, all really factor in determining if there's more of a cost-effective way of handling all your waste and recycling requirements. In addition, contact your local waste and recycling center to see if you guys are up on current pricing. As you want to keep up to date on your service providers' prices and available options, really to kind of ensure that you're receiving the best price on an ongoing basis. There's a couple, we kind of broke down a couple of different areas that kind of see a pretty substantial savings on an annual basis. So if you're running like a food distribution center, you can see about $25,000 a year on average. Healthcare facilities, you're looking at about $10,000 a year. Office buildings in downtown areas, you're looking at about $11,000. Commercial buildings, about $6,000 a year. Apartment buildings, probably about $15,000 a year. Grocery stores are the big ones. You're looking at probably a savings of about $25,000 a year or so. As you can see, your time analyzing a waste and recycling cost is pretty much, it's very well spent.
All right, workers' compensation premiums. They could be pretty large depending on your industry. In our experience, we've seen that over 70% of all companies either have been or they're currently overcharged for the workers' compensation premiums. It's a large percentage, but you do have options when it comes to lowering that workers' comp premium. Unfortunately, it can tend to be complicated. Usually after work comp policy ends, it's the insurance company that's performing that premium audit. What's good about this is that they're not the only ones that can play that game. You can too. The most effective way to go about auditing your policy, you're going to want to review the past 5 to 7 years of classifications, experience rating, calculations, and premium audits if you're trying to do it yourself. Industries that have an annual workers' comp premium of about $50,000 per year or more, they're typically best suited for an in-depth analysis of that premium. Businesses also that have multi-state operations increase the chance of recovering a refund. As I said before, you could do it in-house, or you could reach out to a company that specializes in analyzing work comp premiums. You can also, as a company, lower your work compensation premium by a few things. You can compare policy options, hire the right people. You can make safety a priority. You can check employee class codes. But if you're gonna outsource it, companies like the Insurance Offices of America, they give a line-by-line audit, and they do an incredible job of breaking down current work comp policies and helping you to reduce the costs going forward. And we've seen some significant savings taking that approach. Now, parcel freight shipping. Now, if your business ships freight often, and let's say they spend $300 a month, there's going to be options for you to reduce this cost as well. Specifically, if you're working with either FedEx or UPS, these cost reduction strategies, you're usually best procured through an outside cost reduction firm that specializes in freight audits or logistics. What you can expect to see typically is a 3% hard dollar savings that's going to come in the form of refunds from your carrier. In addition, you're going to also save on average an additional 7% through the use of a variety of analytics that a logistic company has. And that includes the analyzed late deliveries, invalid surcharges, incorrect dimensional and weight charges, which tend to be common. But there is, and this is the important part, is kind of focusing on the fact that you do have the ability to reduce these existing costs, cost for your parcel shipping.
Yeah, that's a good point. And sometimes we need to remember that we could take a look back and work with our existing providers to really negotiate, more favorable terms for our business. As anyone has ever really owned a cell phone, look, they're not cheap. We know that. Costs have dropped over the past couple of years. Company wireless plan could be expensive, for ourselves and our employees. There are telecom expense management firms out there that work with businesses to reduce your cost of your wireless services. And this at times really can include changing like carriers, which can be time consuming and a large undertaking for some of these larger businesses. There are options available though that allow you to remain with your current service provider and still reduce the cost. Some of them out there, it's about anywhere between 27 to 40% cost savings on an annual basis. A large portion of these savings are derived from unpublished rates, leveraging these unique rate structures and utilizing promotional discounts, which carriers don't really share with you. None of the unpublished rates, rate structures, or promotional discounts require any contract negotiations either. Now, these savings are benchmarked and awareness driven, and anyone with the knowledge can really leverage them. You can also set a benchmark of controllable spend and conduct a line-by-line audit while comparing overall industry rates and user bases. This will also allow you to determine incorrect billing. An audit also provides you the opportunity to eliminate or mitigate overcharges from international long distance, roaming, voice, text, data, and discounts.
Okay, time for another mind break. I understand that we've shared a lot of information and it's quite a bit to absorb. So a recording of this presentation will be available for your convenience. But with that said, are there any questions at this time that we could try and answer for you?
And while we're waiting, good, you got one?
I've got one. What's for credit card merchant service fees on the low end? What would you think is the low end of the fees that somebody should pay?
There's not going to be low. It's going to differ between the verticals, the size of your company, the volume, where you're located. That's not a question you can answer. First, go ahead.
Just let me add on that, Karen, real quick too. Is when you're dealing with like a credit card processor or merchant services, there's a difference between having a card present and a card not present. Okay, yeah. So they get involved. Obviously, if the card present, the transaction is more secure because they can see it physically in front of them. Okay, when a card is not present, there's going to be a charge. There's going to be an internal fee, higher fee for that because it's a bigger security risk. Yeah. Okay, for a fraudulent transaction. So there's there's really no happy medium. The only way to truly get to that is get on the phone with your existing provider, or reach out to a company that specializes in this and does an audit of your last 3-4 month statements, and it really kind of tell you, okay, you're on point with this, or maybe they're overcharging you for this. Yeah. All right, so there's really no happy medium there. And look, merchant service providers, there's a million out there, and we all have a headache dealing with them, honestly. But we're just trying to really provide this information to all you guys to say, hey, you know what? You can negotiate with these providers. Yeah. Lower those overall costs. You come to the game well armed, they're going to have to do something about it.
Well, without a doubt. And that information is available on the internet. And the important thing to understand is when you look at everything from an aggregate standpoint, you look at the specialized tax incentives, you look at the corporate cost reduction services, the cash flow benefit can be tremendous. As you know, on average, working with a mid-sized company, our average is $250,000 plus in cash flow benefits, and we find something 90% of the time when we're working. So it's important that you guys know that you can do it yourselves, and this is how you do it, right? This is how you go about, looking into how to lower your merchant services. This is how you can lower your workers' comp. You don't have to rely on a company necessarily. There are strategies out there you can do, or on the flip side, there's some amazing companies you can engage that can do it for you. And the important thing to know is you're not changing service providers. You're not messing up your operations or breaking contracts or doing anything that can adversely affect the flow of your business. I think that's important. And I think it's important to know that these opportunities exist, and they're there to leverage what's available and currently what's, let's say, the best rates possible, and certain factors within your vertical or your industry they're up on. So it's like the taxes can be a little bit dry, I understand, but it's pretty cool when you look at it as a whole, how much it can help. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Got it.
Gotcha. Any other questions, Jennifer?
No, not that I see. So enough of a break. So let's look at one of the funner parts. Let's look at taking the SH out of IT.
Okay. Our final act, we're going to focus on telecom, cloud, and IT. More precisely, how to procure these services and save a boatload of money in the process. For years, the process that you use to purchase your service is pretty straightforward. You need a phone, you call the phone company. You call Verizon. You need internet connection, you call your local provider, you call Spectrum. If you need both, you call Spectrum, you buy a bundle, right? It's pretty straightforward. But there is a much better way to purchase these necessary services that are essential and important, but to also save a significant sum by doing so. The first that we would recommend, or the first step in doing this, there are technology, or let's call them telecom service providers, available that you can engage that can almost act as a service aggregator for you. This is the first step really in getting away from a traditional way of purchasing the services. You want to find an advising firm that's both vendor agnostic and has a strong track record. But you want to make sure that they're telecom service providers and not your average managed service provider or MSP. A trusted advisor, they can provide a lot of solid benefits, including a very robust service provider portfolio. They can provide a single point of contact rather than having to call Spectrum, Cox, Verizon, and try to negotiate. They're not going to pressure you like you do. Well, you get like a quota-based provider sales rep when you go directly to the company, because they do have quotas to fill. You get personalized strategy and solution planning, and you get an expert that works directly with either your MSP or your CTO or CIO, should you wish, and can acquire greater leverage with teleco carriers in their portfolio. This, for you guys as business owners and entrepreneurs, allows you to kind of recover lost hours by just outsourcing your telecom cloud projects, and always allows you to make sure that you're cutting edge on technology and up to date on things that change, especially post-COVID in the post-COVID world. So all incredibly important as we grow more and more reliant on technology. None of the aforementioned benefits come with calling a toll-free number and simply ordering services from all the providers that you're going to need to rely on. By utilizing, let's say, a technology service provider or a firm that specializes in this, you can make one call and purchase services for Zoom, Spectrum, Cox, Google Cloud, migrate to the cloud, migrate to the data center, and get all your telecom service providers that you need. As I mentioned before, it's like a telecom aggregator, but you're still built through the large companies, the Verizons and the Spectrums, and you still receive the technical support from the large companies, the Fortune 500 companies that have a robust technical support staff. So the only difference being is you have both an individual that's going to handle these orders, and you have an advocate to lean on while you're going through the process. So step one, find a firm that specializes in telecommunications, that is a service provider, and vendor agnostic.
Yeah, vendor agnostic. I mean, when you're looking for the vendor agnostic, like trusted, like tech advisor, one of the really first things you want to look for is their service provider portfolio. Are they going to be able to connect you, to your local internet provider for like your high-speed broadband? Are they going to be able to leverage their client base and purchasing power to really reduce the cost of your services? What companies do they represent? And are they really truly vendor agnostic? Having a robust service provider portfolio really provides you the opportunity to quote not just one but several companies for the service that you guys are looking for. This gives negotiating leverage, as you can use these points to really negotiate better rates and terms. and it really drives down that monthly recurring charge that you guys charge or charge on a monthly basis.
A robust service provider is important, but at the same time, so is a robust technology portfolio. Having a vendor agnostic advisor that can provide a robust technology portfolio and access to top names in the industry, AT&T, Verizon, Zoom, et cetera, equates to being able to aggregate the procurement of your telecom services and speed up the delivery of the services. All right, so if you're going to engage a firm that can migrate your company to the cloud via Microsoft Azure, they can set you up at UCAS or Ring Central, give you a dedicated internet fiber circuit through AT&T, and they can do this all while leveraging a large buying consortium that average 40 to 60% discounts or savings in each service area versus you going directly to the company and working with the company's sales rep that only knows the company's portfolio, only cares about what you purchased with that company and what they're pushing that particular month. Maybe you're going to get a small discount, and maybe there's going to be a small promotion running, but you're not going to be able to leverage a large buying consortium. When you've got the telecommunication optimization groups and the service groups, they're able to leverage that larger buying consortium. You know, and that kind of makes it clear on why it's so important to establish a relationship with a telco firm that's looking out for you while partnering to ensure reduced costs and really the resulting cash flow increase by saving that much money on your telecommunications spend. So this is the power of a vendor agnostic technology advisor, the robust portfolio of services, solid technology solutions. Then the big thing is they can leverage a nationwide buying consortium. Once they harness the purchasing power, they're going to reduce your spend anywhere from 40 to 60% on average versus going direct. And these types of companies, they can be found nationwide. And again, our good friend Google, you can Google these companies, you can find these companies, interview a couple of them, compare their portfolios and their technology portfolios, compare their approach, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. You know, all right, so what do we learn? What do we want to do? We want to find a firm that represents a multitude of service providers and can be vendor agnostic. That's a biggie. Make sure that the firm has a robust portfolio of services nationwide, and make sure the firm also has a large technology portfolio and can be your quasi service procurement aggregator. They can go and get you the internet, the phone, and all the other telecommunication services you need. And if all three prior points are met, make sure that they have a buying consortium that you can leverage when you're procuring the services. And if they do, you should be saving at least 40%. What happens is they also have contracts that you don't have access to with the vendors or with the master agent, and you should be able to leverage those. So these should all be musts when procuring telecom services, and they're very widely available today. Unfortunately, a lot of startups, small, mid-sized businesses don't know that, or they see, you know, their internal technology CIO, CTO sees them as competitors, which are obviously not. But we strongly recommend taking that approach. It's a great way to procure your services.
All right. Well, that was quite a bit of information that was shared. We can't thank you enough for spending time with us, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on the topics that we discussed. Again, a recording of the presentation will also be available should you want to watch it again, and also if you would like a copy. Again, we would like to thank the University of Central Florida Business Incubator Program, Michael Weiss, and everyone that joined us today. A big thank you from the team here at CG Moneta, LLC, the nation's premier cost reduction firm.